My own personal path of totality. Vondre Sweat was arrested yesterday on DUI charges. By the time you watch this, there might be more details about it. But the gargantuan 366-pound defensive tackle, who I dreamt of as a rhythm changer for the Texans, not because he fits in the scheme as D'Amico dreams of it, but because he can be. He could be a brute force if he lost some weight. And this is going to be one of the issues with a DUI for this kid versus issues for other people. Vondre Sweat is a force to be reckoned with, but just not athletic enough to do what I think D'Amico would want him to do unless he loses some weight. We'll get into that a little bit as we go on. I just do want to refresh everybody's memory a little bit because I know I did Devondre Sweat a little while ago. The biggest thing that impresses me about Devondre is for a guy who's as large as he is, for one, very good hand-eye coordination. You're going to see a blocked kick here. I know this is what we usually start out with Devondre Sweat, but for a 365-pound guy, I like to look for signs of athleticism, kind of like with DJ Reader. Remember DJ Reader was a pitcher in high school, a baseball pitcher. I like to look for signs of extreme athleticism because, frankly, to be as big as these guys are, to be able to carry that much weight, you got to be kind of a freakish athlete. A lot of guys like Keith Traylor came into the league as an oversized linebacker, if I remember correctly, and he ballooned into like the size of two linebackers. But he had to be athletic enough to carry that weight. But then when it comes to the brute force stuff, like just watch Devondre Sweat and how well he uses his hands. Both him and his running mate were both so well coached, and that defensive line coach went off to LSU. But I mean, he sheds dudes. And granted, these are small college offensive linemen, but there are a lot of guys Devondre's size who do not use their hands as actively or as well as that. They just kind of bully people around. So it's a sign that he has put the work in. It's not like he's just out there beating people with just natural ability. He's put a lot of work in. You just see how active he is right there. He throat slammed somebody while he checked the oh boy. It's like, oh, so my first thought when I was watching Devondre Sweat as a college player was, okay, I'm seeing him doing a lot of this versus smaller offensive linemen, just tossing him aside, holding up to double teams well, doing all of that. And yeah, Bubba, I agree with you. We might actually watch the whole Alabama game. Probably won't have time for it today. But that is the problem. He peters out at times. You know, he'll win his block, but depending on where it is in the game or how long he's been on the field, he just can't move fast enough towards the perimeter to make plays sometimes. And that's a problem. If you're a run stuffer, it's one thing if you can't rush the passer. He actually can rush the passer, but there's times where he just doesn't have it in him to get to a spot. So his willingness and ability to lose weight and to live a disciplined lifestyle is a really, really big deal. And I know we don't have all the details on the DUI right now, but we'll shed a little bit of light on that. Yeah, exactly. Couldn't use NIL. I'm very distraught over this because I had a dream that somehow this would be the guy in the second round the Texans take, kind of like a beefy Manu Ginobili, where Ginobili was very much a rhythm changer and a buster. Like he wasn't quite didn't fit into that system, but that's what made him good. I felt like this could be our portly Ginobili, and it is as bad as an analogy as that is. I think it makes sense in a weird way. There's so many good defensive tackles that are going to be available in the second and third round, are good prospects and guys that fit the system that it probably doesn't make sense. But I like the way this kid plays, and I wanted to see him do well. So you see him beating up on just your average college kids. Then you get to the Senior Bowl, perhaps a better caliber of competition, and he's just doing the same thing. He's got such long arms, and he just absolutely just blows somebody off. And then even here, like normally he actually would have probably pushed and pulled at that point. And when it comes to the brute force and strength, he's really good. But then when guys have to just lean into him, you see him with quick swims like that. You don't see this often out of guys as big as he is. The problem is that he kind of reminds me of almost a Ted Washington type. And Ted Washington was awesome back when every team had a fullback and teams ran the ball 60% of the time. And it's just not that way. So I will say I'd never seen him in street clothes before. And when he did his perp walk, I was kind of impressed by how good he looked in street clothes. Like, he carries 365 really well. It's not a problem for him. Like, that body weight, as far as just if you're an offensive lineman, it would be fantastic. Just a couple questions. Yeah, Michael Hall Jr., Fisk, one of those guys, Chris Jenkins, lightning fast like Danico Autry, and Eric Armstead. Eric Armstead's the interesting one because we're going to get to him in a minute. I think Fadi will play that pocket pusher role for us. Lots of great DTs in the late rounds, or even like second through fourth rounds. I have a hard time saying great DTs in the late rounds because the vast majority of those guys, the vast majority of guys in the second through seventh rounds aren't actually going to be good. So I never, ever fall into the trap of thinking like, oh yeah, hey, we filled that spot because we got a draft pick. Damn, that old white guy. Thank you. Are we talking about his attorney? I don't think that attorney looks good enough. He's not. Let me tell you something. Tavondre's not so big that guy actually looks like a possible defensive tackle. So I don't think that old white guy. Now, KVUE in Austin. Oh, you guys were probably hearing that, weren't you? KVU. I got this off of KVUE in Austin. I don't know if that's where the original interview was, but they didn't put any attribution on it other than that. This is him in November of this year talking about putting his drinking days behind him for a little bit.
I promised myself this season, like, I'm not going to go out. I'm going to stay tuned in, lock in, stop drinking.
Okay.
I told myself I ain't going to drink till we win a Big 12 or the Natty.
And that was at the beginning of the season?
Mm-hmm.
Put it down, and
I put it down.
Pick it up until
I'm not going to touch it to the Natty and the Big 12.
Till April 6th.
And so far I'm strong, so...
Yeah, so Dane Brugler said, according to a team source, Sweat has been upfront with NFL teams about his partying as an underclassman and made a point of emphasis in his interviews that it was all in the past. Obviously, today's incident 3 weeks from the draft won't help answer any concerns with teams. And honestly, that's where I am with this. It's that the Texans, I think, have loosened up a little bit in trying to get nothing but choir boys in. Not that they were ever completely that way, but the biggest concern I'd have here with the DUI first is just like it was with Laramie Tunsil. Find out everything behind the story before you condemn a guy. But he's got a history, at least enough that he had to talk to teams about it and do interviews about putting drinking aside. That this is not a good sign, especially for somebody that, like in my opinion, needs to lose at least 20 pounds. And I'm not optimistic that he's committed to losing 20 pounds. He's just not good enough of an athlete. Even today's NFL, to be a nose tackle, I'm skeptical of him playing at the weight that he was at. So it's just a lack of discipline it's a lack of discipline and commitment to like genuinely being what he needs to be in the NFL. And it showed at the combine. He did not move well. He did not move like other big men, like a Vita Vea, who's 20 pounds lighter. Vita Vea is 20 pounds lighter than Tavondre Sweat. That's how much bigger he is. As far as depends on how he handles it. I don't know, Gary, if you're talking about this legal situation or just him and his body weight. But in terms of legal situation, it might be too little too late if he's already demonstrated issues with it. Like, I don't want to take him in the second round anymore. I would say the fourth or fifth round or so. I've got a comp for him in a little bit that some of you guys might appreciate. But Lance weighed in on this. He said, having multiple Texans fans ask me about Tavondre Sweat and whether or not he would be a Texans target after his DUI arrest, I would be surprised if he is still on their board. I mean, never say never, but I'm not sure the Texans want to disrupt the momentum with a player they may not be able to trust. This is just a guess. So Lance doing the double disclaimer there that's his, not his inside information or anything, but just a guess. I don't know about off the board completely. And I think a lot of this is going to depend on what their interviews were with him at the time. A couple of the responses to Lance that I thought were notable, and I only put on here people who follow me on X.com, of course. But the Mixon signing says otherwise. I disagree with this, just in that Joe Mixon has been a productive NFL player for a long, long time. He had that allegation last year that he ended up being cleared from. The other incident was involving his sister, not him, but it was at his house. And I think that the fact that Mixon has shown that he's a viable NFL player and can keep his nose clean is very, very notable. And again, I don't think it's not an apples to apples comparison. Devondre Sweat, though, look, when you're a dude with NIL money, especially, if you're any human being at all, but if you're a dude with NIL money, especially, there's no excuse not to get an Uber in this day and age. I don't know. I assume I know it was a long time coming to Austin, but I'm guessing they have Uber now. So, yeah, that part of it is, I think, what they're more concerned about than anything. They're not necessarily worried about assault or anything like that. He's a lovely human being, as far as I can tell. In the Bob McNair era, the Texans rarely gave players with off-the-field blemishes an opportunity. Seems like they forgive a little bit more now. I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans did still draft Devondre Sweat. I would be. I'd feel different if anybody was hurt. Jalen Carter last year, for example. And that's the ironic thing. So Jalen Carter last year was projected to be a top draft pick, had an incident in which a couple people died, very shady circumstances, reportedly had either maturity issues or what have you before all of that happened, and he still gets drafted, 11th overall? So, yeah, he really plummeted down the draft board there. I know a lot of people have mentioned the Ravens now as a likely, as soon as anything like this happens where you've got a good football player but potential off the field or workout issues or what have you, the Ravens seem to have a way of snapping guys like this up. We'll see. I do think the Texans are not at the Ravens level when it comes to stuff like that just yet, but they have loosened. It's the whole discipline part of it, and not to be callous or anything to anybody that has genuine alcohol issues, but that's still a concern. If that's the issue, then that's very much a concern. I don't know if he was on the board to begin with. After they traded Malik Collins, I think it's obvious D'Amico prefers tackles around the 290-pound range. Ideally, guys like Eric Armstead or DeForest Buckner or Sheldon Rankins last year. One thing about Eric Armstead is, yes, he's 290, 295, but he's also 6'7". Like, he's a huge beast of a human being. And it brought up another, and I'm just going to look up DeForest Buckner to be sure, by the way. It brought up another guy I thought of, which was Grover Stewart, because Grover Stewart was a guy that, boy, is DeForest Buckner 6'7" too. Is 6'7" as well. So he's not a fat guy or anything. But he's certainly a physical presence, more so than Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins were, regardless of body weight. So this is the part that concerns me. Let's see, Jalen Carter fell down the boards and came on as a top 2 rookie. We shouldn't put too much into this. I'm not. This is the thing about Jalen Carter versus Devondre Sweat. Jalen Carter is a freakish athlete, and it was a better all-around football player and a much, much more impressive athlete. So he did fall. He just didn't fall as far. There's that constant balance between talent and potential off-field issues. That talent really does a lot to allay concerns about off-field issues. But as the talent or body weight starts to come closer to the potential off-field issues, people get concerned about it. Like Jalen Carter, like as he gets older, like all of this, as he gets older, he'll mature. Yes, 100%. But this is what you're trying to figure out. This is what drives me insane. And I'm not taking this out on you, Shifty Mike. I would never do that to you, Shifty Mike. Yes, just a mistake. People ain't perfect. I agree, 100%, Shifty Mike. But here's the thing, because I said the same thing about Jalen Carter. It's all a matter of risk assessment. I'm not sitting here condemning the dude one bit. I am not doing that for a moment. You think I'm going to be the ultimate hypocrite and act like everybody who's ever drunk driven at any point in their life is just a monster? Of course not. But when you're evaluating people, and especially a guy that's talked to teams about how he perhaps partied too hard in the past, and then he had to make a conscious effort to set aside alcohol this year, it's a concern. And like with Johnny Manziel, because what you're saying is a lot of what people said about Johnny Manziel, right? Well, when I was 22, here's the thing to remember. I believe there's about 4 million 22-year-olds in America right now. Only one of them will get drafted number 1 overall. So the criterion of what was I like when I was 22, probably not the best standard to figure out who needs to be one of 4 million people. So of the 210 or so people that get drafted, you're going to move them up and down based on whatever your concerns are about them, what kind of football players they are, all that stuff. This is something that you factor into it. So if I was already nervous about how Vondre Sweat was going to handle his weight in the NFL because he's too fat. There's times when he looks like Paul Blart running after a perp and he can't catch up to him. That's bad. That's not a matter of being a pass rusher or anything else like that. He needs to lose weight, and he flat out has said that he doesn't want to do it. This is him at the combine.
Ma'am, I haven't. We weigh in tomorrow. So everybody that want to know, you'll see tomorrow.
What do you expect? Where do you want to be the most effective that you can be?
This past season, I played 365, and that's where I feel comfortable at.
That was a pretty big increase from what you played at previous seasons. What was behind that decision?
You know how man is. I mean, you want yourself. We got to grow into our bodies, and this is me, as y'all see. I'm a big guy, big frame, and that's just how it is. I just grew into my body, man.
Yeah, so like that's just how it is. I grew into my body. I can tell you honestly, and I don't like putting the low lights up because I did that once last year or 2 years ago with Trevor Penning, and I felt bad about it for months afterwards. It's just too easy for somebody to grab it and take the low light reels. There's just times where his highlights are astounding. His highlights are phenomenal. There's other times where he's just a little too sluggish. And it wouldn't hurt him if he were playing offensive line or what have you. But he's just not the same guy as some of the extremely large men who have played in the league before, like Vince Wilfork. Vince Wilfork was maybe the prototype for being ridiculously big, but also would go sideline to sideline. And I just know from looking at Vondre Sweat's frame, watching him at the workouts, like he would be a lot better if he'd lose 20 or 25 pounds. And so far right now, it doesn't look like he's committed to doing it.
I'm doing everything at the combine before y'all even ask. I feel like a lot of y'all gonna be like, when I run this 40, I'm gonna shock a lot of y'all, so.
What do you anticipate running?
4.4, 4.5, Get a body there.
See, he's very likable, but he ran a 5.27, which isn't not the be all end all of by any means. Yeah, thanks, Shifty Mike. And I didn't mean to get animated in your direction or anything. It's just something that it's like I think sometimes people start talking in absolutes about things like this, and I'm the last person to condemn somebody for any mistake they've made about it, like to an almost too extreme degree. I feel like everybody can come back and everybody deserves a second chance. But it's all about just slotting people right now. And there are a lot of guys in the second, third, potentially fourth round that don't have the concerns that Vondre Sweat does, and that have more complete and total tape than just the highlight reels. So, and like Vondre too, like, don't get me wrong. I'm not painting like I don't think that he's lazy whatsoever. It's just like, look, I've been there. When you're physiologically, when you're too heavy, you can only do so much. You can have all the want to in the world. You can have the desire, but especially in the Texas heat, your legs just give out on you at some point. And that's what I worry about with him. Just to illustrate a little bit where he is as an athlete, like this is his spider chart from Mock Draftable. So you can see the weight, he's 99th percentile, wingspan 77th percentile, hand size 90. He's just a gigantic human being. Look at his vertical, his 40, his 10-yard split, all that stuff. really, really, really bad. Like really bad. So we talk about Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter was off the charts with that stuff. More athletic than a lot of guys who are much smaller than him. And that's just not the same, which honestly, given that I've seen him move faster than this when he's fresh, it makes me wonder just how hard he actually trained for the combine. One of the comps that Mock Draftable put out based on his combine measurements kind of surprised me because it was Grover Stewart, who I love as a player. But if you look at Grover Stewart, he had this 20-yard dash and his 10-yard split and all those other things were at least kind of average. His height, bench press, all those things were just kind of average. His vertical was really, really bad. But if you look at his weight at 97th percentile, this is what surprised me. Grover Stewart, if you've watched him play, he's a nose tackle for the Indianapolis Colts. He's probably about 315. At the combine, he was 347. And I think it's a perfect example of a guy coming out of Albany State. He was 347, got drafted in the 4th round, and he ended up having to lose 30 pounds. He's just a big old country kid from Georgia, like country. When you hear him talk, he sounds like Dameon Pierce, like he's country, and but very, very likable. Like I think he and Dameon Pierce would do a really good podcast together or fishing show or something. And it worked for him. He's one of my favorite defensive linemen to watch. He's just a stud versus the run, but can also collapse the pocket. Plays with really good reps. I just don't know about whether or not Vondre can get there. So let me take some of your guys' questions. And I feel like, and I hate doing this because I really like Vondre Sweat, and I think he's got a lot of potential. Very few big men like him have technique like he does. So I have no idea how many teams are going to grade him down over this or how much they already had based on perhaps a perceived lack of commitment. But it's weird to see a guy that's, you can tell, is drilled really well. And I know that defensive line coach there was really good. But like you can see that he actually cares about working at his craft and everything. It's just the complete and total sum package isn't quite there yet. If they took him in the 4th round as a project, then I think it would be awesome. I don't think he'll fall that far. I think that a team, whether it's the Bengals, the Ravens, somebody else like that, is gonna see him actually. It'd be a better scheme fit for some other teams than the Texans too, and that's a big part of it. Is that this is the one thing where the scheme fit alone was a bit of a question mark when. It's really easy to say like, oh, we've got 2 second-round picks. Let's just spend it all on a big old defensive tackle who doesn't quite fit the scheme. He's going to be situational at best. Yeah. Seth, you are too far away. Thank you. Bubba, I appreciate that. Thank you. I was in Kansas City in 2017 by the Chiefs Stadium. Went to Union Station after. Same place Stroud, Anderson, and Dell were drafted. Now the Eclipse is back. Super Bowl confirmed. He is my path of totality. Does he project better as a 3-4 nose or a 3 technique? He projects better as a 3-4 nose tackle. 100%. 100%. He wouldn't be a 3. He wouldn't always be a 3. He would rarely be a 3 technique, I think, in this scheme. I think he would be in a 4-3. You'd have him playing nose tackle, and the 3 technique would flop sides. You can't always do that, so sometimes he'd be playing 3 technique. But even just in asking that question, I start visualizing it, and I get a little bit nervous. If he drops to the 3rd or 4th, you'd be a good project. I agree. So it's a little fantasy that I had started to have. Good morning from Thailand. Thank you, Joe. How do you sit in a wooden chair for 4 hours? It's how I keep from sitting in the chair all 4 hours. I usually, when I'm working from home, I'll go into my gym during breaks and do like a little bit on the elliptical or a little on the stationary bike, or do some like calisthenics or something. I got my gym in the next room over, and that's what keeps me from being sedentary all the time. I've tried like a gaming chair before, and I had Vondre tried problems. Okay. This is my quick story about being Vondre sized and how I know that it's hard to run when you're like that. When I was done playing, I was living on the beach. We still had a house there in Jacksonville, And it turned out that it was right next door to Tom Coughlin. Coughlin built a house there. I didn't realize it when I had bought the house, but he was building it at the time. So Tom Coughlin was my next door neighbor after when I was recently retired from the NFL. He's a completely different guy when he's your neighbor, like in all the right ways. I would have trusted him with I feel like he would have murdered an intruder for me if need be. But I remember I woke up one day at like 10 in the morning and hadn't figured out what I was going to do with my adult life yet. So I was just kind of in limbo. And I didn't wake up at 10, but I was out and about at 10 o'clock one morning, and I was staring out at the beach. And it was like the first time in my life it had occurred to me, oh, there's actually no reason for me not to have a drink at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday right now. I'm not technically on vacation, but I've got nothing to do. And at that point, I was in reasonably good shape. Like within a few months, I was up to over 340. I was trying to talk my wife into that I should just start dressing in like Polynesian wear because we're on the beach, and I just wanted to wear like a sarong everywhere we went, and or whatever those are called. Sorry, no offense. And she was opposed to that. Plus, at the same time, a bunch of defensive linemen were dying. Like Reggie White had died, Norman Hand, like quite a few defensive linemen died after pretty soon after they retired, right around when I retired. And it kind of scared me straight. And I started running and shuffling, and eventually jogging. And then I transitioned into something you might call a run. Started doing running 5Ks, and I ended up running a marathon. I ended up running a 50-mile ultra marathon once I realized I was always going to be slow at marathons. And I've seen it. Like I've been there. I've been at 350. And I know what it's like because I started running at 350, and I know what it's like when I'm down at 260. Vondre Sweat needs to lose weight, and honestly, part of it too is he's a guy that enjoys life. He could be Tony Saragusa in 2002, but it's not 2002 anymore. It's the modern NFL, and you're facing empty backfields and three wide receiver sets all the time. Seth the Survivor. It was brutal. Me living in that beach house. There's the hardships I faced, drinking sugary alcohol in a beach house and everything. Somehow I made it through. The commentator using Albert Hainsworth, who had that scheme versatility. Do you see that? That's a good question, Mellow Mike. I don't think he's as athletic as Albert Hainsworth, and nobody was really talking about him as a first rounder. In a different era, perhaps, and honestly, in a different era too. He could have driven drunk with the coaches and scouts that came to work him out on their way to the bar afterwards, and they would have been cool with it. And some of those scouts and coaches are still working in the NFL, and that's why I think there's going to be some team out there that's like, well, if he's going to slide to the third because all these pansies won't draft him, then I'm going to take him. That's my Rex Ryan impression. I'm going to get going. Appreciate everybody hanging out. I owe you more appraisals of more defensive tackles, so I will get into that this week. I might as well. There's nothing else going on. It's just that the Texans keep breaking all this news, and then I end up talking about that because news pops, baby. Thanks, everybody. I'm Seth Payne. Please hit the like, hit the subscribe, and everybody have a great post-eclipse sexual relations with your partner. That's how to appease the gods. That's what they want.